So in this video, I want to talk about my experience using the Venu 2. I've owned this watch for 2 months now. It's not been my primary watch. I've used it on and off for around a month. And as of the late 14 days or so, it's been my primary watch on my left wrist. So I feel like I have a little more experience and can talk about how it's actually held up after 2 months of usage. When it's not been on my left wrist as my primary watch, I've been using my other Garmin watch. I have a Tactics Delta, but it's pretty much the same as the Fenix 6X. So that's been my primary watch, and I've been wearing the Venu 2 on my right wrist just to compare data between the two. And like I said, the last 14 days I've used this as my primary watch on my left wrist. So first off, let me just take it off and let's have a look at the condition of this watch here and how it's actually held up. So first off, I am wearing this sports band. I have made a video about this from Amazon. I believe it's called Yo Side or something like that. Of course, I can share some link to the video down in the description below. I really like this band and I highly recommend it if you're looking for a lightweight sports band. Of course, super comfortable, super breathable, and like I said, very lightweight. But anyways, let's just have a look at the watch itself. Just clean it up a little bit here. So after 2 months of usage on and off, you can see around the bezel here, the only real mark I have on it is right here. And I'm not really sure I can pick this up on camera. There's a little thing right there. I have definitely bumped this watch into several things throughout the time I have owned it, especially when I was wearing it on my right wrist. And this is one of those things where it actually looked a lot worse, but after cleaning it, I took a toothbrush and just cleaned it. There's just a little thing that's scratched off right there. Else, I'm not really a big fan of this bezel material or design. You kind of have these grooves all the way around, and you can see easily dust and all kind of gunk are accumulating in those grooves there, and it's kind of hard to clean actually. Only thing that really worked for me was using a toothbrush and just go clean it under the sink with some soap, but it's hard to see actually if it's scratched off or if it's just some kind of dust or gunk or whatever will accumulate there when you're actually wearing the watch. So not the biggest fan of this design element of those grooves there all the way around the watch here, the watch frame. But other than that, I kind of like this design, and the look of the watch looks fairly modern, understated, and it does fit quite well on my wrist. It is a very shallow watch, especially if you're used to a big watch like the 6X Pro series. This is a very big, heavy watch and thick watch. It's kind of refreshing from time to time to just wear this very lightweight compared to it. And of course, it does have the plastic body or polycarbonate body. It is a stainless steel bezel and does have Gorilla Glass 3 on the screen itself. And let me just clean off the screen here. Yeah, you can see the screen here. No scratches as of yet. And even though the screen looks like it is kind of bent and have a curvature to it, it still is a little bit recessed into the actual watch frame here. So it's not really that exposed, and especially if compared to like Apple Watches and so on. It does have a little bit of protection from bumps from the outside elements. But other than that, Gorilla Glass 3, it will probably get a few scratches along the way, but it is quite a hard material. So it does take quite some force to actually scratch a screen like this. But as of now, 2 months later, not a single scratch on the screen itself. So it's held up quite well. And by the way, I have the big version. So this is the 45mm variant. There's also a slim version of this, which has a smaller bezel, but this is the biggest of the two. So overall, using this watch, I kind of like it. I like the new Elevate heart rate sensor. It is a little bit faster than the previous models, and it is also significantly faster if you use it to read your oxygen level in your blood, so the pulse ox reading, much faster this time around with this newer sensor here. But in terms of its actual accuracy, it is pretty much on par with the old type heart rate sensor on the Fenix 6 series. In terms of its actual reading, like the overall reading is pretty much exactly the same as the 2, but the pulse ox reading on the older sensor is definitely a lot slower compared to the new elevate heart rate sensor on the Venu 2. So I definitely do like that. Also, one of the fastest watches I've had from Fenix to acquire GPS fix or to log on to satellites. This is very fast, only a few seconds. For me here, I live in the city, so I live like next to big buildings. And with the Fenix 6 series, it can take like several seconds, like 10, 20, 30 seconds to actually log on to a GPS. Whereas versus this one here only takes a few seconds. So I really like that. And also in terms of accuracy, I find this to be quite a bit better than my Fenix 6. If I leave my Fenix 6 on quite some time after I've actually acquired a GPS fix, it would be pretty similar results. But if we're just talking about getting a GPS fix or logging onto satellites and just go out for a run immediately after you have gotten that log on, then the Venu 2 is a better watch in terms of accuracy when it actually comes to GPS tracking. I also really like this AMOLED screen. It looks really nice. I wouldn't say I really miss it on the Fenix series, but it is definitely very nice to look at. And I like the fact that it's also a higher resolution. So if you get a text notification, email notification, and so on, I use my watch for my primary notification device. It is nice to be able to read more text compared to the Fenix series. And I've had no issues with this watch here in direct sunlight. I keep it at auto level, the medium setting. So it will automatically ramp up the brightness according to the ambient lighting. And I've been able to read this watch here no matter what lighting conditions I've been in. As you can see here, I have set the watch to turn off automatically. Originally, I plan to use it with the watch on all the time, but it just drains the battery so fast. So I'm only looking at a few days of battery life. I was hoping to squeeze like a week out of this watch here with always on display, but unfortunately it just drains the battery quite significantly. And as well, even though I have to flip the wrist to actually see the time, a lot of the Connect IQ watch faces also drains a lot of battery. Even though they are not really on, they will still run in the background. And I've had a lot of issues with Connect IQ watch faces. Some of the more detailed one or more data prone one tend to just crash. So all I see is a little Connect IQ icon there in the middle, and a few seconds or moments after it will kind of reboot or whatever, and I can see the watch face again. So there's a lot of trial and error actually getting a watch face that actually works without draining the battery, and also of course having all the data points that you will need in your daily life. So this is the one I really like. It's very high in contrast, not really all that colory, so you don't really take advantage of that OLED screen in terms of color at least. But you can of course customize this, and I just leave it at all white here. This watch face here is called Simple TDB, and it's a free watch face, but of course you can always support the developer and send him a cup of coffee and whatever. But this is definitely the one I like the most. I've tried several other, both from Garmin and from other manufacturers or other developers. This one is definitely the best one if you, like me, like to have a few data points on the watch face itself. So I have my date, I have the current temperature, I have the sunrise and sunset times up in the left corner, week number, and I have my actual pulse or my current pulse. I can see how many notifications I've had, and I can see the battery percentages, and of course I have Bluetooth enabled, and as well if it's in sleep mode, I get a little sleep icon down here as well. So I get all the information I personally need, and like I said, this is definitely the watch face I really like. But talking about watch faces, this is one of the areas where I'm kind of disappointed in Garmin, because even though a lot of the watch faces they included the watch by default looks quite nice, you can see there's quite a few, you can't really customize it at that much at all. So if you come from an Apple Watch or expect the Apple Watch level of customizability, you'll be heavily disappointed with this watch here. It seems like Garmin is just expecting you to use Connect IQ watch faces, but that can have a mediocre result, and you can end up draining your battery and, like I said, have unstable results. But you can see, for instance, this one here, I cannot really do anything but select it or delete it. Kind of unfortunate. And this one, even though I can edit it, I can only really select the color out of 2 colors for this specific one here. And that just goes on and on. This one I can only delete. So I cannot really edit it. For instance, this watch face here has 3 data points, battery, date, and day as well. But if you go in here and hit the little edit button, all you can choose really is color, and there's only 2 colors you can choose from. So you cannot really edit what kind of data you will have on the watch screen. It's kind of unfortunate. There are a few of them where you can do so. For instance, this one here, if you go in data, you can kind of add data points, but the maximum amount of data points you can add to these watch faces is 2. You can only really have one in the top, one in the bottom, or one in the left or right, depending on which watch face you have. Only if you select one of the lower widgets here or data info, you will get some more info going onto the screen, but not with this one apparently. But you can see this one, if you choose the last one, you will get battery and date and seconds. Else you only really have one data point there and one data point in the top. Yeah, I find that a little lackluster, and I really would like a little bit more. And for instance, this one here, where you have a lot of data points, you cannot do anything but delete it. It's very, very strange in my opinion. You can also go in and make your own. Let me see, I've made one. This one, for instance, is one I've made. But again, you only have 2 data points, and only you can select, if you select battery, you can see you get 3 data points up here. I cannot choose which one I will have on either side of the battery status. So it's fine enough, but it definitely leaves a lot to be desired for me personally. And for instance, I really like this one here with Garmin. This one came in an update. This one was one of the new watch faces. But again, I cannot really customize it at any means. But I really like all of the data points, except I cannot get the current date on there. I got a sunrise and sunset, and I got the current weather and compass and my pulse, time and day, but no date. And I really like having my date on my watch so I can quickly just glance at it. Else I will have to swipe down here and see what, like, this is the Wednesday, the 20th. So yeah, for me, the watch faces is definitely the biggest issue I have with this watch. And like I said, if you plan to use Connect IQ watch faces, you really need to try them out and see if they work properly or if they will drain your battery. And this one is the one I've used lately and seems to be just all right. And speaking of draining the battery, also one thing I'm a little bit disappointed in this watch here. Garmin claims up to 13 days smartwatch mode. I have this watch connected to my smartwatch, or my smartphone, excuse me, 24/7. I do use the 24/7 pulse reader, but I do not have pulse ox, so I do not measure my pulse oxygen automatically either at night or during the day. I leave that off. And for me, I charged this watch Friday night. So in the evening time, when I came home from my run, I charged this up to 100%. And you can see now it's Wednesday. So 3.5 days of usage, and I'm down to 32% of battery life. I have tracked one activity using GPS, and let me see if I can find it. So you can see here, I did track an activity on Monday. I went for an 1 hour and 45-minute run. So quite a long run, but that's the only thing I've done where I tracked the activity or the GPS on this watch here. Other than that, I've just used it as a smartwatch, of course, for all of my notifications as such. I'm down to 32% of battery life in the afternoon here on Wednesday. So yeah, not that impressive. It seemed to hold up pretty close to Garmin's claims of 11 days of smartwatch mode. I'm losing around 10% a day. So if you're just using it as a smartwatch, of course, but the more you use this watch and check out the widgets and get notifications and of course track your activities, and depending on the watch face you use, for me it's maybe around 5 days of battery life. Maybe I can squeeze an hour, or 7 days out of this watch if I only went for like shorter runs or shorter walks or something like that for like 30 minutes a day. Maybe I could get close to a week. But if you're doing any kind of longer runs for an hour or so a few times a week, the battery will definitely not last you a full week. And I am not using Bluetooth headphones, and I don't use this as a Bluetooth music player when I'm running. For that, I use my Sony Walkman headphones, which doesn't have any Bluetooth but have a built-in storage. So these are standalone devices. So if you're using music on this one here and stream to your Bluetooth headphones, the battery will just be even worse than this. That's close to a deal breaker for me, especially if you are comparing to like a Phoenix 6X series. This watch here, of course, with always on screen, I get around maybe 20 days between charges, maybe 14 to 20 days between charges with the same use case. But with that said, charging of this watch here is relatively fast, does support fast charge. So a full charge doesn't take as long as the older generation of Garmin watches. So that's definitely a nice added bonus there. And if you, like me, prefer to have like physical buttons for everything, which is especially coming handy now when we're going into autumn and winter here in Northern Europe or in Scandinavia where I live, the touch interface can be a little bit annoying. I do have gloves on occasionally when I'm running. I do have those kind of gloves where you can actually use touchscreens as well. Kind of finicky still. And you know, when you're running and just wanted to swipe between different data fields, it is much more secure to have a physical button you actually can press. And yeah, I kind of miss that when I'm out in the field. You do have, of course, two physical buttons on the right. Of course, one to start activities, stop an activity, and the back button, which is also your lab button. So you can at least start and stop your activity using a physical button, which is definitely what I prefer. But a lot of the stuff still has to be done in touch screen interface. For instance, if you want to save your activity, you of course have to press the little save button or discard it if you want to discard it for whatever reason. You still have to do that with the touchscreen. And a lot of the navigation, of course, going into the menu structure and so on, you still have to use the touchscreen. So if you are out in the elements, of course, wearing gloves and it's colder weather conditions, this is probably not the watch I would recommend you. I still would say go for a watch with the physical buttons, even though there is definitely times where it's nice to actually have the touchscreen. For instance, when I have to type in my password to use Garmin Pay, it's nice to be able to just type in the password on the screen instead of having to go back and forth between the different numbers. If you want to set a timer, for instance, it's also a little easier to just press the numbers directly on the screen instead of having to, again, click between the different pages. So it does also have its advantages, and maybe even kind of nice sometimes just to be able to use the touchscreen going through your widgets and such. It is kind of nice to definitely just be able to swipe between the different pages, and you can swipe just to go back. So it's not all bad, but in terms of fitness watch, and especially in the colder weather, if you're wearing gloves, it can be a little annoying actually to touch that screen, and especially if you are running and you are on the go, having to swipe between those different pages when you're actually on your or measuring your activities can be a little annoying. But it's definitely manageable, and I don't think it's a deal breaker. So after 2 months of owning this watch here and 14 days using it as my primary watch, I still kind of like it. I'm not totally in love with it. Definitely not going to replace my Fenix 6X or my Tactics Delta version of the Fenix 6X. Kind of a little bit curious to see how much of these features will actually be ported over to the Fenix 7 series, which I'm kind of curious to see. Should be able to, or should come out maybe 2022, in the beginning of 2022. We'll probably get a new heart rate sensor, maybe even better displays on the Fenix 6 series. And I kind of also hope for some kind of hybrid between physical buttons and touchscreens for like map navigation and type in passwords, and like number type in is definitely much easier to use a touchscreen. It would be nice to some kind of hybrid of those two. So I like it, and it's a little more in terms of fashion wear compared to like the Tactics Delta, which I definitely like the more rugged design here. But it's also nice from time to time just to have something a little more subtle on the wrist. And it is a very lightweight watch, especially with this sports band here. So I pretty much don't notice it on my wrist, which is definitely something I do with the bigger watch, especially when running. It is kind of a heavy watch. So next time around, because I started running more seriously, I would definitely go for a titanium version of this watch here, because yeah, like I said, it can be a little heavy. Don't really mind it when I'm hiking and doing any kind of bushcraft, but for running, it is a little bit on the heavy side. Not cause me any issues, but definitely something I noticed when I'm switching to this watch here. It just sits on the wrist a little bit better because of those movements. It doesn't really move down as much on the wrist. So yeah, after 2 months, I would say I'll definitely still recommend it. If you prefer having a lot of customizability with your watch faces, and if you think this can kind of replace an Apple Watch, I'm not really sure I would go for this one instead of an Apple Watch if you really want the smartwatch feature and if you have an iPhone, because this definitely lacks a little bit in terms of the smart functionality. You get your notifications and such, but you cannot really reply and do anything other than that. Not that many applications for this watch here. You do not have that much customizability with the watch faces, and like I said, the Connect IQ watch faces you can download either by paid watch faces or free watch faces. They can vary a little bit in terms of how they actually work and maybe drain the battery life and make the watch a little more unstable, and can also at times make some watches kind of slow or sluggish. So if you want a smartwatch that can also track your activity, I'm not really sure I would recommend this one here. But if you are in the Garmin ecosystem and you really want to be a little more serious with your activities, I believe Garmin is a better tool overall because it has everything built into the watch. You do not have to download any other applications to actually get going, and all of the applications like running and hiking and cycling and swimming and so on inside this watch are quite good. And also you get all the other stuff like sleep tracking, you get your body battery. Yeah, it is quite a nice watch overall, but it's not the best in terms of smartwatch, but that's never really been Garmin's strength. Although I like the AMOLED display, I definitely am missing the always on display on my Tactics Delta or Phoenix watch. Even if you keep the display on all the time, if you have the watch on 24/7 and you set it to sleep mode or to not get any notifications while you're sleeping, do not disturb while you're sleeping, the screen will still go off when you are sleeping. Or for me personally, I just turn it off or notifications off at around 11 at night. And after 11 at night, you cannot just flip your wrist and see the watch, which is kind of weird. Even if you have always on screen turned on, it will just be completely blank and you have to press a button. So there's also a little bit of inconsistency actually using it for just telling the time. Not a big fan of this flipping the wrist movement, so I hope Garmin can like implement a screen like this and get like the same kind of battery life with the screen off as with the screen on. That would just be excellent. So I recommend this watch, especially if you can get it at a good deal. Seems to hold up pretty well. And if you like Garmin and tied into Garmin ecosystem, this is the best AMOLED screen watch you can get, period. The only really option you have is going for the older Venu series, but I'm not really sure I would recommend this over this one here. Of course, some affiliate link down in the description below. I also made an unboxing video and after 7-day video of this one here, and like I said, also videos about this watch band here. If you are interested, of course, you can go and check those out. But that's pretty much it for this video. I hope to see you again in a future one. Until then, take care.